Thank you, Wolf. Your studio is in Wien. This is reminding me that contemporary architecture has to face layers and layers of historical architecture, physically and intellectually. How do you live the fact that contemporary architecture has to be somehow disruptive in relation to the past one, and at the same time in harmony with the past?
I like your questions. Yeah? There's almost a historical lecture about how an architect has to deal with old-fashioned buildings. Two things. Vienna is a small city, loaded with a lot of history. And when I was young, I really tried to escape this heavyweight history. But later on, let's say the last 10, 15 years, I could see there is an influence of the historical part in the way of thinking, even on the young architects as well. The problem is that of the history is that, for instance, the first Viennese district is the mental map of how should a city look like in the memory or in the head or brain of every Viennese, which has actually diminished or suppressed the development of a real new, modern, modernistic, postmodern, no, not postmodern, modern architecture. This is a problem. On the other hand, Vienna is more, más o menos, more or less Baroque city. Let's say it that way, yeah? But a lot of Baroque buildings around. And I developed, without being a historian or an art historian guy, I developed a theory that I said the Viennese and the Austrian architects are influenced by the way of thinking by the Baroque buildings, churches, palais, in diversity or discrepancy of, or not, let's say, Unterschied to the other people in Holland, Spain, France, or American. For instance, in the Dutch architect Rietveld would have been never ever possible in Vienna. Kiesler never ever have invented the endless house in Rotterdam. So there must be a deep unconscious influence of the way of thinking, of the cultural background of the country, religious or not. The Spanish architects are really like Jesuits, or the Swiss guys, yeah. Never ever Herzog Demerer would have developed the buildings if they would have been brought up in Vienna. So, and what's so different? Thinking in space sequences is a very Baroque and therefore a very Austrian phenomenon. And the other thing is, imagine that the Baroque architects built tons of material, heavyweight cupolas, and then they painted it away. So this is surrealistic and very, very crazy, yeah? And this is what I call rock over baroque. This is what the Dutch guys, yeah, they are like this way of thinking in diagrams. Never ever would diagrams have a diagram would be a point of departure of architectural thinking in Vienna. Never ever.
And which was your first step into architecture and your first falling in love with it?
My father was an architect, so I was brought up in an architectural family, so to say, and he was a very well-educated architect in terms of craftsmanship. So this is what I learned, but the point of departure of my decision that I want to be an architect was when I visited as an architectural student La Tourette of Corbusier. So when I came to this church, yeah, you know that, this concrete wall with this bell tower, and when I saw this so-called ear, this organic shaped chapel with tubes in order to catch light, and I thought, if this is architecture, I want to be an architect.
So the first contact with the living thing, I think. Being 1968, the foundation year for Coop Himmelblau.
6th of May.
6th of May also.
Very important.
May is important. It's obvious to find a relation between the cultural climate of the period and, let's say, the breakage and the modern approach of your studio. How was the spirit of the foundation years? Architecture must still burn?
Yeah, we just sat together with. I just sat together with a team, and we developed a building which should look like the Flügel, the wing of a libella. This is what our studio is famous for, bringing always new ideas into the discussion of architecture. And to be honest, I hate to stand still, because if there is no progression in your thinking, then you are dead. So architecture must burn
and burn.
Still counts.
Yeah.
And it was very important in the 60s, and no one knows that so exactly, that at this time not Palladio or Vitruve was important for us. Mm-hmm. Important for us was music, philosophy, education, science, the Formula One racing cars, the space helmet, much more important than the columns of Palladio.
You have been demanding, propositive, and in quotes, contemporary since the years of foundation. Your effort was also a matter of explaining, fighting, motivating and describing. How much an architect must be a preacher of his architecture?
Yeah, if you take Le Corbusier, then you have to follow his way if you want to be famous. Look at Rem Koolhaas. He copied the way of Corbusier almost down to the letter. Yeah? To express yourself not only in buildings. Yeah, let's say it the other way around. We couldn't build our buildings in the first days of our existence of Coop Himmelbau. We had no commission. Therefore, we made drawings instead of buildings. We were writing in order to promote the impression the building will, if it's built, it will have. So all these other things were, we always wanted to build, but we couldn't build, therefore we had to escape on these fields. Since we are building, we don't draw that much anymore, and I don't write that much anymore, so that's okay. That's okay.
And how much architecture and decision making about architecture and urbanistic choices can be participated?
You mean democracy all over? Do you think that doctor who is making a heart surgery is believing in democracy? How I always explain to my clients, yeah, if they say I don't like that, could you make it the other way around? I always say, would you dare to ask your heart surgeon, please make the cut a little more to the left side? Never ever. I'm the specialist. I know what I'm doing. I'm experienced. I'm educated. Of course, you have to invite people to bring ideas into your field. It's welcome, because I'm a team player. I like to play in a team, but decision I have to do, because I'm responsible for it. So this is the problem we have to face. Everyone can make proposals, but who is responsible for it?
You talked also about the process of identification between a building and its inhabitants. And I think that being part of something is also the final result of an educational process. Do you think that people are aware, conscious, and they know sufficiently about modern architecture, its history, processing, and choices, or not?
Why do they like Schönbrunn? They have no idea about the wasted history of this castle. They have no idea about what was going wrong at this time, but they like it because it's a kind of identification point because of the color, the stairs, the park, whatever. So what we have to do, we have to create another identification points in this anonymous fabric of the city, so that the people can describe where they live. And the best thing it could happen if they have a nickname for your building. Then you know it's in their mental map.
More and more, contemporary architecture is a world challenge, more complex than in the past. Which are the main issues for an architecture studio that is competing all over the world?
Yeah, we are not competing. I'm interested in some problems which I think I can solve because of my experience. But I'm not really competing with other guys that for dead or alive, this is stupid. And the architects are ruining themselves by doing competition and competition and competition. The problem of the architecture nowadays is that the education is not good enough to develop a consistent line of thinking and build it. So the academic world is taking over. That means no one who is not in the profession of the realization of ideas knows what's going on. And the worst are the incompetent critics which try to influence the development for their own fame. Yeah? This is the most stupid thing. Yeah?
Too complex. But anyway, the golden rule nowadays seems to be sustainability, the proper balancing between several elements. Which are the most urgent today, in your opinion? Because you propose, for example, buildings that are also machines for energy. This is quite interesting. And the Brain Lab City also.
Yeah, safe energy is a step back in the development of our world. I think we should think about producing energy. So instead of making Taliban architecture, meaning thick walls, thin light slits, we should make open buildings which have a new kind of facade which produces more energy than the building consumes. That is an upcoming thing, but we have to think, if we are building this kind of buildings, we have to develop a new aesthetic as well. Because without a new aesthetic, you cannot promote new ideas in architecture.
You are part of the future of architecture, but how do you imagine it in a few years?
If I would know that, I wouldn't sit here, I wouldn't be the president of the world. I don't know, but I think that the critics ruined the progression in architecture by putting this unspeakable, stupid label on innovative architecture, namely they say this is star architecture. And all these other not so talented colleagues took that as a sign that mediocrity could take over. And since this is since 10 years going on, I can predict another 5 years, and then this stupid ideenlose, not creative, not innovative box architecture will be finished. Yeah? Everyone thinks that if we make some cuts in the facade, that's an innovative building, and the critics write that is very innovative. This is it's decorative and has no goal to show people that life is bigger than life.
Thank you very much.